Hello and welcome to Ben Omtad, a podcast of open-minded thought and discussion. Here I recount and discuss folk tales, myths, and philosophy with various people, hoping to grow through dialogue and bring forth truth, wisdom, and insight in the interaction. Yes, I'm here with LL, the partially anonymous, the initialed eponymous friend of mine that I do the podcast with. Today we're going to read a story called Little Red Cap, which is the Grimm's brothers' version of Little Red Riding Hood. And so I'll read that story and then we'll talk about it. Once upon a time, there was a dear little girl who was loved by everyone who looked at her, but most of all by her grandmother, and there was nothing that she would have not given to the child. Once she gave her a little cap of red velvet, which suited her so well that she would never wear anything else, so she was always called Little Red Cap. One day her mother said to her, "Come, Little Red Cap, here is a piece of cake and a bottle of wine. Take them to your grandmother. She is ill and weak, and they will do her good. Set out before it gets hot, and when you are going, walk nicely and quietly and do not run off the path, or you may fall and break the bottle, and then your grandmother will get nothing. And when you go into her room, don't forget to say, 'Good morning,' and don't peep into every room before you do it." "I will take great care," said Little Red Cap to her mother, and gave her hand on it. The grandmother lived out in the wood, half a league from the village. Just as Little Red Cap entered the wood, a wolf met her. Red Cap did not know what a wicked creature he was, and was not at all afraid of him. "Good day, Little Red Cap," said he. "Thank you kindly, wolf." "Whither away so early, Little Red Cap?" "To my grandmother's." "What have you got in your apron?" "Cake and wine. Yesterday was baking day, so poor sick grandmother is to have something good to make her stronger." "Where does your grandmother live, Little Red Cap?" "A good quarter of a league farther on in the wood. Her house stands under 3 large oak trees. The nut trees are just below." "You surely must know it," replied Little Red Cap. The wolf thought to himself, "What a tender young creature! What a nice plump mouthful! She will be better to eat than the old woman. I must act craftily so as to catch both." So he walked for a short time by the side of Little Red Cap, and then he said, "See, Little Red Cap, how pretty the flowers are about here. Why do you not look around? I believe, too, that you do not hear how sweetly the little birds are singing. You will walk, you walk gravely along as if you were going to school, while everything else out here in the wood is merry." Little Red Cap raised her eyes, and when she saw the sunbeams dancing here and there through the trees, and pretty flowers growing everywhere, she thought, "Suppose I take grandmother a fresh nosegay, that would please her too. It is so early in the day that I shall still get there in good time." And so she ran from the path into the wood to look for flowers. And whenever she had picked one, she fancied that she saw a still prettier one farther on, and ran after it, and so got deeper and deeper into the wood. Meanwhile, the wolf ran straight to the grandmother's house and knocked at the door. "Who is there?" "Little Red Cap," replied the wolf. "She is bringing cake and wine. Open the door." "Lift the latch," called out the grandmother. "I am too weak and cannot get up." The wolf lifted the latch. The door sprang open, and without saying a word, he went straight to the grandmother's bed and devoured her. Then he put on her clothes, dressed himself in her cap, laid himself in bed, and drew the curtains. Little Red Cap, however, had been running about picking flowers, and when she had gathered so many that she could carry no more, she remembered her grandmother and set out on her way to her. She was surprised to find the cottage door standing open, and when she went into the room, she had such a strange feeling that she said to herself, "Oh dear, how uneasy I feel today, and at other times I like being with grandmother so much." She called out, "Good morning," but received no answer. So she went to the bed and drew back the curtains. There lay her grandmother, with her cap pulled far over her face, and looking very strange. "Oh, grandmother," she said, "what big ears you have." "The better to hear you with, my child," was the reply. But grandmother, what big eyes you have, she said. The better to see you with, my dear. But grandmother, what large hands you have, the better to hug you with. Oh, but grandmother, what a terrible big mouth you have, the better to eat you with. And scarcely had the wolf said this, than with one bound he was out of bed and swallowed up Redcap. When the wolf had appeased his appetite, he lay down again in the bed, fell asleep, and began to snore very loud. The huntsman was just passing the house and thought to himself, how the old woman is snoring. I must just see if she wants anything. So he went into the room, and when he came to the bed, he saw that the wolf was lying in it. Do I find you here, you old sinner? Said he. I have long sought you. Then, just as he was going to fire at him, it occurred to him that the wolf might have devoured the grandmother, and that she might still be saved, so he did not fire, but took a pair of scissors and began to cut open the stomach of the sleeping wolf. And when he had made two snips, he saw little red cap shining. And then he made two snips more, and the little girl sprang out, crying, ah, how frightened I have been! How dark it was inside the wolf! And after that, the aged grandmother came out alive also, but scarcely able to breathe. Redcap, however, quickly fetched the great stones with which they filled the wolf's belly, and when he awoke, he wanted to run away, but the stones were so heavy that he collapsed at once and fell dead. Then all three were delighted. The huntsman drew off the wolf's skin and went home with it. The grandmother ate the cake and drank the wine which Redcap had brought, and revived. But Redcap thought to herself, as long as I live, I will never by myself leave the path to run into the wood when my grandmother has forbidden me to do so. It also related that once when Redcap was again taking cakes to the old grandmother, another wolf spoke to her and tried to entice her from the path. Redcap, however, was on her guard and went straight forward on her way and told her grandmother that she had met the wolf and that he had said good morning to her, but with such a wicked look in his eyes that if they had not been on the public road, she was certain he would have eaten her up. Well, said the grandmother, we will shut the door, that he may not come in. Soon afterwards, the wolf knocked and cried, open the door, grandmother. I am little Redcap, and am bringing you some cakes. But they did not speak or open the door, so the graybeard stole twice or thrice round the house, and at last jumped on the roof, intending to wait until little Redcap went home in the evening, and then to steal after her and devour her in the darkness. But the grandmother saw what was in his thoughts. In front of the house was a great stone trough, so she said to the child, take the pail, Redcap. I made some sausages yesterday, so carry the water in which I boiled them to the trough. Redcap carried until the great trough was quite full. Then the smell of the sausages reached the wolf, and he sniffed and peeped down, and at last stretched out his neck so far that he could no longer keep his footing and began to slip, and slipped down from the roof straight into the great trough, and was drowned. But Redcap went joyously home, and no one ever did anything to harm her again. We'll just kind of go through it, kind of line by line, and kind of discuss it. Um, so it starts off with a little girl who is dear. You know, she's beloved by everyone, and most of all her grandmother. And she's going to go visit the grandmother who has given her her prized possession, her little red cap. It's a little red velvet, and it suited her so well. It's like a marker of her identity. It's what the story is called, Little Red Cap. Other versions, Little Red Riding Hood. You know, that's sort of how everybody knows her. You know, she's like the heart of the community or the family. Everybody knows her and loves her well. So at the end of this version and and the other versions, when she's eaten, you know, that's especially heartrending. Of course, in many of the earlier versions, she when she is eaten, she is never saved after that. That's just the end of the story. So there's sort of a grief element here from a time when so many children were lost. uh, to families. So yeah, one day her mother said to her, "Okay, come, little red cap. Here's a piece of cake and a bottle of wine. Go bring them to your grandmother. She's ill and weak, and they would do her good." So this heart of the family is going to go help an elder, another member of the family who's a little farther off. It's also someone who's a little out in the woods, a little away from town, a little away from the safety and order of civilization. And I think the didactic nature of the Grimm's version is here, where the mother is instructing her before she sets out on the path to go to grandmother's house. So set out before it gets hot. And when you're going, walk nicely and quietly and do not run off the path, or you may fall and break the bottle. Don't forget when you get to grandma's house, say good morning and don't peep into every corner before you do it. So this is like the, civilization. It gives us laws, procedures to follow, and not just for safety, but for social order. There's the politeness to the grandmother. And then yes, little red cap so goes off again to grandma, who lives a little bit out in the woods, a little away from safety. And then of course the first thing she comes to is the wolf. So there's danger now outside of the city for a little vulnerable girl. And I said, Little Redcap starts off with love. Everybody loves her. Now she has rules. And then the wolf meets her, but she doesn't have any knowledge. She's naive. So she doesn't know to fear the wolf. So that could, the wolf could be anything like a kidnapper, or, child kind of predator or something like that. And child might not know uh, to fear them. And of course, the wolf is about to use sweet language and everything, and people like that will know to do that. And parents would want their kids to know not to fall for that and to be scared, properly scared with knowledge. And so the wolf says, "Good day, little red cap. Thank you kindly, wolf. Where do you go so early, little red cap?" To my grandmother. So he keeps asking her these questions. So he's gaining information, and she's very naively kind of telling him everything, to even to where she tells him, my grandmother's house is at this certain place. I mean, surely you know that place, right? I mean, you're just like anybody else in the neighborhood. So, and then he asks her, "What have you got in your apron?" So he's starting to focus on her person now, not just her sort of her way. "What have you got in your apron?" Cake and wine. Yesterday was baking day, so poor sick grandmother is to have something good to make her stronger. And then she tells him where grandmother lives. And now he knows that. And so he just distracts her with some little frivolous kind of beauty. And also, she wants to bring a gift to show her love for her grandmother. So tells her to go pick some flowers. And the wolf thought to himself, "What a tender young creature! What a nice plump mouthful! She will be better to eat than the old woman. So I must act craftily as to catch both." So he's already planning everything, and she's just naively kind of going with what he has pointed out to her. And just like she's kind of naively following to the letter what her mother told her to do, but she doesn't have understanding as to the whole plan. Only the wolf does. In fact, in this whole story, only the wolf does. Uh, See, little red cap, how pretty the flowers are about here. Why do you not look round? And so she goes off pick flowers while he goes to grandmother's cabin, and he gains access to the place. He ran straight to the grandmother's house and knocked at the door. "Who is there?" "Little Redcap," replied the wolf. So he's hiding his identity within her identity. "She is bringing cake and wine. Open the door." "Lift the latch," called the grandmother. "I am too weak and cannot get up." The wolf lifted the latch. The door flew open. Without saying a word, he went straight to the grandmother's bed and devoured her. Then he put on her clothes. So again, there's this identity thing. He puts on the grandmother's clothes, dresses himself in her cap, and laid himself in bed. So it's like the wolf in sheep's clothing, the wolf in grandmother's clothing, the conniving wolf. Little Red Riding Hood goes there. She's surprised to find the cottage door standing open. And when she went into the room, she had a strange feeling. Oh dear, I feel uneasy. So this is the first time that she finally feels uneasy. It has to be, I don't know, kind of obvious. Like when she saw a wolf and she knew the name of the wolf, and yet she somehow didn't know to fear him. That hadn't been in her instructions or something like that, or in her experience. It's interesting that she finally has some uneasiness here. I mean, what do you think about that?
I don't know. I just kind of see it just it's more of her innocence since she got distracted with the flowers, like with
Yeah.
something beautiful that it kind of um she she just didn't once she got distracted, she kind of didn't really think or to think about the wolf.
Yeah, but she had seen the wolf before that and not been afraid, so she doesn't have the knowledge. But now, when she's in the grandmother's cabin, she kind of has this feeling. But maybe
Mm,
it's just there's so many, she already knows grandmother's house well. And when you know something well, it's easier to sense when something is off. Maybe it's something like that. It could be that, he ate the grandmother, there'd be some blood around or something, even though in this version she's later shown to be whole in his belly, although she was having a hard time breathing. How uneasy I feel today. She called out good morning, but received no answer. So she went to the bed and drew back the curtains. There lay her grandmother with her cap pulled far over her face. And then, of course, there's the famous dialogue again. Just like there's a dialogue at first, it's between innocence and malevolence, or between predator and prey. Oh, grandmother, what big ears you have. Better to blah, blah, blah. Crescendoing to, you know, what terrible big mouth, the better to eat you with. And scarcely had he said that, he swallowed Little Red Cap. And then I think I mentioned that in many earlier versions of this story, that's when the story ends. It's like sadly ever after. That's what happens when you don't understand a wolf when you see one. But in this version, it's more didactic and, it's softened or sanitized. So when the wolf had appeased his appetite, he lay down in bed and he snored very loudly. So otherwise, he would have maybe gotten away with it, but it's something about his laziness or uh, meat. Carnivorous animals, I think, do once they eat a lot of meat and then they'll sleep for a long time. I think tigers will sometimes sleep for 20 hours at a time, something like that after they've eaten a lot of meat. It's kind of hard to digest all that fat and protein and everything or something.
mhm. Yeah, and they always like the easiest prey too.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah. So it's a kind of biological reality of this story. But then because of his snoring, he's very crafty and clever, but then because of his nature, of kind of maybe, yeah, being lazy or very sleepy after a big meal, then that gives himself away. He snores very loudly, and the huntsman who kind of passes by, who knows the grandmother, there's again the human strength of community and communication and caring and checking on them. That was part of the human part of the story. The huntsman has, and so he hears the grandmother snoring loudly, and maybe he knows she's sick, and so he goes in to check on her, and that's when the humans end up winning in this story. So the Grimm's version is kind of more like a civilized version. So he goes into the cabin and he's going to shoot the wolf, but then he thinks, oh, maybe he swallowed the grandmother. So he cuts her open. I mean, cuts open the wolf, and then he sees little red cap, cuts open more. She pops out. Then the grandmother pops out. Then little red cap has the idea to fill his belly with stones, which is kind of funny because she's so naive and innocent and beloved. But now she's getting a little like crafty herself.
Hmm.
And so they fill his belly with stones, and then he dies. And of course, this version, this Grimm's version, also has there's another wolf that that they have to contend with, and their grandmother and Little Red Cap are shown to be much more competent this time. And so maybe
Hmm.
that adds to this didactic element of this story. Like they're really trying to say, hey, we really can beat wolves. Come on, guys.
Hmm.
You thought this story is pretty straightforward, just kind of didactic tale. I think you and I both thought at the time later in the story when it emphasized Little Red Cap learned not to go off the path, because that
Yeah.
when she'd gone off the path, that's the wolf, and that's the being distracted by the flowers that he pointed out to her. Instead, keep your eyes forward on the path, go forward straight. Very, maybe
Hmm.
it's that sort of very Protestant ethic or something, kind of going
Hmm.
forward in life, not
Yeah.
getting
Yeah.
distracted, not listening to bad influences.
Yeah. Just emphasize just how if you get off that path, you're in disorder and danger. Um,
Yeah.
and you're vulnerable.
Yeah, the straight and narrow path. With this story, with the second wolf, it explicitly shows how, I mean, it implies that they maybe wouldn't have known how to deal with the second wolf if they had not had to deal with the first wolf. Yeah, that's always you want to, I mean, to learn things in life, you have to take risks, but you don't want people to be dying too much from the things that they're doing. So
Mm.
it's always just a balance between those two, finding the right risk for your sort of the age of a child or the level of competence of a person. Interestingly, yeah, this version also makes clear the difference in nature between the wolf and Riding Hood or Redcap, because at the end it says Redcap, after they drowned the wolf, the second wolf in the trough, that had come around to try to pull the same stunt with Grandma. Um, they lured him in there with like the sausage water. But Redcap went joyously home and never did anything to harm anyone. It's funny that they emphasize just the innocence of Red Riding Hood, which is kind of, maybe about femininity, virginity, things like that. And with the virginity and sexuality, I mentioned to you that this, in some earlier versions of the story, this does seem to have a little bit of a sexual element, even more than this one. You could say there's a little bit of it because the wolf approaching the girl, and he's like, he's using he's kind of manipulating her mind with his words. That's sort of like what a seduction is. And then he distracts her with flowers, sort of like a seducer might, distracting with beauty and words, and then going all the while cunningly planning something else for consumption, for taking something. And then, of course, late when Redcap meets him again, she has the uneasiness feeling. So, you know, um, that could be read in an erotic way or something, and that she's maybe getting too Freudian here, but
Mhm.
she's entering into a house, passing a threshold. There's almost, you could read into it like a some kind of new stage of life or something like that. And then he's in bed, and he's in a woman's clothes or something like that. You could read all that stuff into it. But anyway, um, the in earlier versions of the story, in some of the versions, he tells Redcap to take off her clothes and throw them in the fire. So there is kind of a seemingly maybe a little bit more of a sexual element there with those stories.
Mhm.
But to me, that sexuality is just, it's not like it's in it's the only part of this story or the biggest part of this story or something, but more like that is sort of that heightens the contrast between the two main characters, Red Riding Hood and the wolf. You know, the wolf is is carnivorous in every way, or he's rapacious in every way, not just maybe in terms of consuming as food, but you could read an erotic element into the symbology of that. But also, Red Riding Hood is innocent in every way. So innocent for, physical dangers, but also, you could say for sexual dangers. So, and that may even be you could say that that could be emphasized even by the color, the red, it's interest, she is a little girl and she's, so she has all this innocence, this lack of knowledge, but she's dressed in red and she treasures that red cap. There's this sort of graspingness and this love or, of that red cap that she has. So there's a little bit of like her growing into womanhood or something like like that.
I'm just reading what the hunter said here about how he's been looking for him for a long time, and he called him an old sinner. So
Yeah.
just realize, yeah, it seems just the wolf has been able to do that for a while, and maybe has just repeats the kind of the same MO, or and but this time like it's not going as well as usual for him.
Yeah.
Um,
And him calling him, the hunter calling the wolf an old sinner, that emphasizes an interpretation of the story where the wolf is a representation of human predators
mhm,
on to civilized, good, loving people, especially the
mhm,
most, like you said, that animal predators do, finding the weakest one. Human predators would probably do that too, especially on the largest scale of strength and weakness, which is men
mhm,
and women in general, you know.
mhm,
I'm sure, yeah, I'm sure, rapists and perverts and things look for kind of, I mean, there's objects of desire, but there's also objects of opportunity. So I'm sure they're looking for
mhm,
kind of people that maybe, exhibit some sort of fear or something like that. I've heard that,
mhm.
and that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's just yeah, just for like the male figures, it's the wolf in the story and then the hunter. So they kind of
Right.
the hunter is just kind of representing just the a man's ideal role as just a guardian of civilization.
Well, yeah, because you've
And
been
then the
brainwashed by the patriarchy. That's what you think. But
yeah, and then of course the wolf's the opposite of
yeah,
just the male desires just gone wrong or dark.
yeah, that's right. And yeah, those are the only two male figures in this story. Otherwise, there's just three female figures in this story, and and the story emphasizes the female figure's weaknesses. So there's the
Mhm,
mother, and she can only try to educate Little Red Riding Hood, Little Red Cap. She can't go with her. She can't accompany her or anything like that. She can only try
mhm,
to educate her. And then Little Red Cap is very vulnerable on the path, half a kilometer or whatever,
mhm,
between her house through the woods, the place of mysterious possibility. All possibilities are in the woods, like and her grandmother's house. And then yes, the grandmother, the third woman in the story, is old and she's sick. So this story again, the contrast here is between strength and weakness. Both the male characters are virile and strong, the wolf and the huntsman, and all the female characters are shown as isolated and vulnerable and in a weakened state. Little Red Cap obviously is young, and young and naive, lacking knowledge as well. So yeah, a lot of black and white kind of contrasts here. Interestingly, in the earlier stories without the huntsman, uh, it's really just about female vulnerability, maybe, and the wolf, and the wolf ends up winning. which is kind of a little bit less reassuring kind of story.
Yeah, they're probably more real, sadly.
Oh, don't say that.
Hmm.
Why do you say that?
Well, I don't know, just general, just you hear bad stories all the time in real life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you hear bad stories all the time. Maybe that's the original Red Riding Hood stories. That's the stories that people tell. But I mean, I think maybe there's a social function to that. We have a negativity bias. I think there's something in evolutionary psychology where people will remember, and probably other animals will remember bad things much more than they remember good things. So that they will have a higher chance of avoiding bad things that way. But they'll avoid good things that way too. But it's better to, you know, to err on the side of caution. But in terms of the male guardian here, the huntsman that saves them all. Um, and by the way, it is funny that little red cap, I'm thinking she puts the stones in the wolf's belly. That almost makes me think again of the sexual element of like a raped woman wanting to get back at her. I probably shouldn't say that for YouTube, but a violated woman wanting to get back at her attacker or something like that. Um, the huntsman, um, when he saves them, it's like he's not really looking for any reward or something like that. And maybe that's why you say he's the ideal kind of male archetype or something like that. Because the wolf, obviously, he has his natural desire, whether you want to read that in just in terms of eating or other things. But the huntsman is just sort of concerned for the grandmother. He's just sort of like a good, decent man. It's funny that he's a hunter too. But then maybe that's, he serves the community by killing things, but also he has kind of an instinct for killing things, and maybe he kind of gets out his aggression by doing that, or having an enemy like a police or soldier or something. But yeah, you
Mm,
think how the second wolf in the story is brought down is kind of funny.
yeah, because well, yeah, it's just sausages and sausage water. And yeah, it just didn't seem something that dangerous,
Yeah, it's
like
very
a
benign.
huntsman with a knife and then getting
Right.
rocks putting inside you. Um,
Yeah.
but maybe it just emphasizes how strongly the wolves are driven by desire in a way.
Yeah.
Even something like this will entice them and uh, kind of uh, and they end up dying
Yeah.
because of it.
Yeah. They'll end up killing themselves, going into a deep, dark well. They'll go into the void in order to pursue their hunger. The second part of the story with the second wolf also emphasizes the women saving themselves, like not having the male kind of come in and save them. They, through their sort of guile and through their work, boiling sausages and everything, they're able to kind of take care of it. And there's just a little hint of that, the women doing some of the violence in the first in the first with the first wolf, because Little Red Cap has the idea to put the stones in the wolf's belly, and that's the thing that ultimately kills him. But yeah, rapacious desire versus civilization. Yeah. Well, I before we read the story, I didn't think of just the kind of black and white dichotomies here, and how that sort of maybe has something to do with the sexuality that you can read into the story as well, which of course adds to the interest, I think. But you don't need to say that's the only thing that's at this story's heart. I think there's some kind of similarity between different kinds of consuming desires, like hunger and lust and everything, that kind of can fit into and power the plots and structures of stories. But all this stuff, yeah, is very interesting once you get into it. But thank you for talking with me today.
You're welcome.